I never imagined that a single night could fracture the life I thought I understood so well. One moment, I was certain of who I was, what I wanted, and where I was going. The next, I was sitting alone in a dimly lit bar, staring into a glass of amber liquid, realizing that everything I believed about love had quietly collapsed. Before I go any further, if you love soft, emotional girls' love stories like this, please subscribe now. New episodes are released daily, and you won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Anna, and until that night, I thought heartbreak was something that happened loudly. Shouting, crying, doors slammed shut with finality. But mine came softly. Jason sat across from me at our kitchen table, his voice calm, almost rehearsed, as he told me he needed something different. He said my silence felt like distance, that my gentleness felt like absence. I nodded while something inside me went painfully still. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I watched him pack a small bag and walk out of the apartment we had once chosen together. When the door closed, the sound echoed longer than it should have. That was when I realized I had nowhere to put the love I still carried. So I went out, not to forget him, but because staying home felt unbearable. The bar was warm and glowing, bottles lined like silent witnesses behind the counter. Low music hummed through the air, wrapping everyone inside a shared illusion of comfort. I ordered a drink I didn't usually choose and held it with both hands, as if it might steady me. That was when I noticed her. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She sat a few seats away, posture relaxed, dark hair falling neatly around her shoulders. There was something composed about her, something deliberate. She looked like someone who knew exactly who she was. When she smiled at the bartender, it was brief but genuine, and I found myself watching longer than I intended. I looked away first. I wasn't ready to be seen. But then her voice reached me, low, calm, carrying an ease that felt out of place in my chest. "Rough night?" she asked gently. I hesitated before turning. Up close, her eyes were sharper than I expected, observant without being invasive. I shrugged, offering a small, tired smile. "You could say that." She didn't push. Just nodded, as if understanding didn't need explanation. "I'm Eve," she said, extending her hand. Her touch was warm, steady. When our fingers brushed, something unfamiliar sparked beneath my skin, subtle but undeniable. "Anna," I replied, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. We talked slowly at first. About nothing important. About the bar, the music, the way the city felt heavier at night. But somehow, the conversation deepened without effort. She listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel less foolish for the things I said. When I mentioned my job as an editor, her interest sharpened. When she spoke about her work, she was vague, careful, as if her life existed behind locked doors. Hours passed unnoticed. The bar thinned out, but we stayed, leaning closer without realizing it. At one point, I laughed, an actual laugh, surprised by how natural it felt. Eve's gaze softened when she heard it, and something in her expression shifted, like I'd been allowed to see a crack in her composure. "I should go," I said eventually, though the words tasted wrong. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Of course." A pause. "Would you like company?" The question was simple. The weight of it was not. I thought of my empty apartment, of Jason's side of the bed, of the silence waiting for me. I met her eyes and felt a quiet certainty rise in me, one I hadn't felt in a long time. "Yes," I said. Outside, the night air was cool, grounding. We walked side by side, not touching, yet painfully aware of the space between us. When we reached my building, I stopped, suddenly unsure. Eve waited, patient, her presence steady like an anchor. I leaned in first. The kiss was hesitant, searching, but when her hand came to rest at my waist, everything inside me softened. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't desperate. It felt intentional, like two people choosing the same moment. When we finally pulled apart, my heart was racing, my thoughts tangled. Eve rested her forehead briefly against mine, her breath warm. "Anna," she murmured, as if saying my name meant something more than it should have. I didn't know then that this night would change everything. That Eve carried secrets sharp enough to hurt me. That trusting her would demand more courage than I thought I had left. All I knew was that for the first time since my world broke apart, I didn't feel alone. I woke up the next morning with a dull ache behind my eyes and the unfamiliar weight of someone else's presence still lingering on my skin. For a moment, I forgot everything. The breakup, the bar, the kiss that had felt far too intentional to be meaningless. Then I opened my eyes and remembered her name. Eve. Sunlight filtered through my curtains in thin, hesitant lines. My apartment felt different, like the air itself had shifted overnight. Eve was gone. No note. No sound from the bathroom. Just the faint scent of her perfume on my pillow and the unmistakable awareness that something irreversible had happened. I told myself it was just a moment, a collision between loneliness and timing. That was easier than admitting how deeply she had already settled into my thoughts. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Jason never reached out. I half expected him to, half feared he would. Instead, silence became my new normal. I returned to work, burying myself in manuscripts and deadlines, pretending that the rest of my life wasn't hovering just beneath the surface, unresolved. Then my phone buzzed. Eve, I hope this isn't too soon. I just wanted to know if you were okay. I stared at the message longer than necessary, my heart thudding softly in my chest. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't demanding. And somehow, that made it harder to ignore. Me, I am. I think. Thank you for asking. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Eve, would you like to get coffee sometime? No pressure. No pressure. I repeated the words in my mind, even as my fingers typed yes before I could overthink it. We met 2 days later at a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Eve arrived first. She stood when she saw me, her smile restrained but warm, like she was careful not to assume too much. I noticed then how controlled she always seemed, as if every gesture was measured. You look well, she said. So do you, I replied and meant it. Conversation came easily again, as if no time had passed. But there was an unspoken awareness between us now, something charged and delicate. When our hands brushed reaching for sugar packets, neither of us pulled away immediately. When she laughed, I watched her mouth longer than I should have. I should tell you something, Eve said suddenly, her tone shifting. I'm not very good at casual. Neither was I. The admission settled between us, heavy but honest. We started seeing each other after that. Slowly. Carefully. Dinners that stretched late into the night. Walks through the city where our shoulders brushed more often than necessary. She never rushed me. Never pushed for explanations about Jason or my past. And I didn't ask too much about hers. That was the first mistake. One evening, while we sat on my couch, Eve's phone lit up on the table. She didn't notice at first. I did. Jason calling. My breath caught. My mind scrambled for logic. It had to be someone else. A coincidence. But when she saw my expression and followed my gaze, her body stiffened. She picked up the phone and silenced it without answering. I can explain, she said quickly. The room felt suddenly smaller. My heart, once soft and open around her, tightened painfully. You know him? I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Eve exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over her face. It's not what you think. At least not entirely. The words were wrong. All of them. Memories rushed in. Jason's calm voice ending our relationship, his insistence that he needed something different. The coincidence felt too sharp to ignore. I need the truth, I said quietly. Not later. Not softened. Eve met my eyes, something raw breaking through her composure. He's been trying to contact me for weeks. Before I met you. I told him it was over. He didn't listen. My chest tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid you'd walk away before you knew me. Silence stretched between us, heavy and fragile. I wanted to believe her. Wanted to hold on to the version of Eve who listened, who chose her words carefully, who kissed me like it mattered. But trust, once shaken, doesn't settle easily. I need time, I said, standing. The distance between us felt unbearable, yet necessary. Eve nodded, pain flickering across her face. I'll give you whatever you need. As she left, the apartment felt colder than before. I pressed my back against the door, my thoughts spiraling. I didn't know if Eve was the beginning of something real or just another lesson disguised as hope. What I did know was this. My heart was already involved, whether I was ready to admit it or not. I told myself I needed space, but the truth was crueler than that. What I needed was certainty, and certainty had never been something love offered easily. Days passed after Eve left my apartment, and every one of them felt heavier than the last. I replayed her words again and again, searching for cracks, for lies, for reassurance. None came. Only questions. I avoided places I thought I might see her. The cafe. The quiet streets we used to walk. I buried myself in work until my eyes burned and my thoughts blurred. But no matter how busy I stayed, Eve followed me, in memories, in unfinished sentences, in the space beside me that felt too empty. Then Jason showed up. He was waiting outside my office when I stepped out into the late afternoon light, leaning casually against the building like he still belonged there. The sight of him sent a sharp jolt through my chest, anger and disbelief tangling together. Anna, he said, smiling like nothing had changed. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice colder than I felt. We need to talk. No, I replied immediately. You lost that right. His smile faltered. Is this about Eve? That single word confirmed everything I'd been afraid of. My hands curled into fists at my sides. Stay away from me, I said, trying to move past him. He stepped in front of me. You deserve to know the truth. I laughed bitterly. You mean the version that suits you? Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. She didn't tell you everything. We were seeing each other. More than casually. She ended it suddenly. Then I hear you're involved with her. The world tilted. You're lying, I said, though doubt crept in despite myself. Ask her, he said softly. Ask her why she didn't tell you how serious it was. I walked away before he could say anything else, my pulse roaring in my ears. I didn't go home. I didn't think. I went straight to Eve's place, my heart pounding with every step. She opened the door looking startled, then relieved, then afraid, all in the space of a breath. Anna, tell me the truth, I said, my voice trembling. All of it. Eve stepped aside, letting me in. Her apartment was immaculate, controlled, just like her. She gestured for me to sit, but I stayed standing, my arms wrapped around myself. I was seeing him, she admitted quietly. But it was never what he thought it was. He wanted more than I could give. When I met you, I ended it completely. Why didn't you tell me? My voice broke despite my effort to stay composed. Because I was terrified, Eve said, her composure finally cracking. Terrified that if you knew everything, you'd never look at me the same way again. Tears burned my eyes. You don't get to decide what I can handle. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. She reached for her phone and handed it to me. Read them, she said. All of them. I hesitated, then scrolled through message after message, Jason pushing, insisting, refusing to accept her boundaries. Eve's replies were firm, consistent, final. Proof laid bare in glowing text. My shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of me. Why choose me? I asked softly, when everything would have been easier without me. Eve stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Because with you, I didn't have to pretend. Because you saw me, Anna. And I wanted that more than anything. The silence between us shifted, fragile but honest. I looked at her then, not the composed woman from the bar, not the guarded CEO, but someone standing exposed, waiting to be trusted. I didn't know if trust could be rebuilt so quickly. But I knew I didn't want to walk away again. I'm still scared, I said. So am I, Eve replied. But I'm here. I nodded slowly. Then we take it one step at a time. She smiled then, soft and relieved, and for the first time since that night at the bar, hope felt less like a risk, and more like a choice. Trust doesn't return all at once. It seeps back in quietly, through consistency, through small moments that prove themselves over time. After that night at Eve's apartment, nothing magically became simple. But something changed. We stopped pretending we weren't afraid. We started again, deliberately this time. No assumptions. No rushed promises. Just honesty, laid bare between us like something fragile we both agreed to protect. Eve texted instead of assuming. She explained instead of retreating. And I listened, even when it scared me to do so. Jason tried once more. A voicemail. Then an email. Eve showed me both without hesitation. She didn't soften the truth or hide the discomfort in her eyes when his name appeared. Watching her choose transparency again and again did something profound to me. It quieted the voice inside my head that had been waiting for the other shoe to drop. One evening, she came over with takeout and no expectations. We sat on the floor of my living room, plates balanced between us, laughing softly at nothing important. At some point, she reached for my hand, pausing just long enough to give me time to pull away. I didn't. Her fingers laced with mine, warm and steady, and I felt the weight of that choice settle gently into my chest. We stayed like that for a long time, watching the city lights flicker through the window. "You don't have to stay," I said quietly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Eve turned toward me fully. "I want to," she replied. "But only if you want me here." I did. God, I did. But wanting someone meant risking the kind of hurt I'd sworn I wouldn't feel again. Still, as I looked at her, really looked at her, I realized something frightening and beautiful at the same time. I was already risking it. Weeks passed, and the rhythm between us settled into something gentle and real. She slept over sometimes, always leaving early, always careful. She remembered the little things, how I took my coffee, which books I loved, the way silence sometimes meant more to me than reassurance. One night, after a particularly long day, I broke down. The exhaustion, the fear, the residue of my past with Jason, it all surfaced at once. I cried into Eve's shoulder, my body shaking, my defenses completely gone. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't offer platitudes. She just held me, her arms firm and grounding, her presence unwavering. "You're safe," she murmured. "I've got you." Those words did something irreversible to me. Later, as we lay tangled in sheets and half-light, I traced idle patterns on her arm. "Why are you so careful with me?" I asked softly. Eve hesitated. "Because I know what it's like to be loved only halfway," she said. "And I promised myself I'd never do that to someone else." Her admission lingered between us, heavy with meaning. For the first time, I wondered what she had given up before me. What scars she carried beneath that composed exterior. The next morning, she stayed. We made breakfast together, clumsy and domestic in a way that felt almost dangerous. I caught her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, her expression unreadable and tender all at once. That afternoon, she told me she was a CEO. Not casually, not boastfully, just factually. I understood then why she guarded her life so closely, why privacy meant safety to her. "I didn't want power to come between us," she said. "It doesn't," I replied honestly. "As long as we don't let secrets do the talking for us." She smiled at that, relief softening her features. But even as things steadied, a quiet fear remained. Love had found us again, yes, but love always asked something in return. And deep down, I sensed we were approaching a moment where choosing each other would mean choosing change. Neither of us said it out loud. Not yet. Change doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as routine, slipping into your life until one day you look around and realize you're no longer the person you used to be. That's how it happened with Eve and me. Not in a grand gesture, not in a dramatic declaration, but in a series of small, intentional choices that slowly reshaped everything. The moment of truth came sooner than I expected. It was a Sunday evening, the kind that felt suspended between endings and beginnings. We were in my apartment, the windows open, the city humming softly outside. Eve stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, washing dishes that weren't hers to wash. I watched her without speaking, struck by how naturally she fit into my space, as if she'd always belonged there. "Anna," she said suddenly, not turning around. "Can I ask you something?" My chest tightened instinctively. Of course. She dried her hands carefully, buying herself time, then faced me. What are we doing? The question was gentle, but it carried weight. This wasn't uncertainty. It was intention. I took a breath. We're choosing each other, I said slowly. At least, that's what I've been trying to do. Eve nodded, her expression soft but serious. I want more than moments, she said. I want a life that doesn't feel divided. And that means I need to stop living halfway. She told me then about the opportunity she'd been offered months ago, an expansion overseas, a move she'd been delaying because it felt safer to stay where nothing could truly touch her, where relationships stayed shallow. Temporary. I didn't want you, she admitted, because wanting you meant staying. It meant changing everything. The fear in her voice mirrored my own. Loving her had already changed me. It had softened places I'd hardened after Jason. It had reminded me that connection was worth the risk. What are you asking me? I whispered. I'm asking if you'll let me stay, she said. Not just here. In this. Fully. Tears welled up before I could stop them. I crossed the space between us, my hands finding hers. I can't promise we won't get hurt, I said. But I can promise I won't walk away just because it's hard. Eve exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for months. She pulled me into her arms, resting her forehead against mine. In that moment, something settled, something final and steady. Jason tried once more after that. A message. Short. Apologetic. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Closure didn't come from him anymore. It came from the life I was building, the love I was choosing. Eve moved in gradually. A toothbrush at first. Then clothes in the closet. Then mornings that began with shared coffee and quiet smiles. Our lives braided together in ways that felt intentional, earned. We weren't perfect. We argued. We learned. We stumbled. But every time doubt crept in, we faced it together instead of letting it grow in silence. One night, months later, we sat on the couch, legs tangled, the city glowing beyond the glass. Eve traced slow circles on my hand. Do you ever regret that night? She asked softly. At the bar. I smiled, leaning into her. It broke my heart open, I said. And I think that's exactly what I needed. She kissed my temple, her presence warm and sure. For the first time in my life, love didn't feel like something I was chasing or afraid of losing. It felt like something I was standing inside of, steady, real, chosen. This was our story. Not perfect. Not easy. But honest. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. If you enjoyed this emotional girl's love story, don't forget to subscribe for more soft, romantic GL stories told in chapters just like this. New stories are released regularly, and the next one might just steal your heart too, growing heart.